All right, anybody watching live should have seen our awesome transition. Yeah! We're getting all technological now. Let's get the show started. What do you think? You're supposed to say yes.
Sounds good to me.
Oh, good. Here we go.
I'm tweeting out that we're live.
Oh, good. Go live, yeah.
News, ops, and a little bit of paranoia. Welcome to the Iron Sysadmin Podcast.
All right, folks. Welcome to a slightly late episode of the Iron Sysadmin Podcast. I'm your host, Nate, and I'm joined tonight by Jason.
That's me.
That's you.
I'm all confused because I had the YouTube feed in the background, so I was watching us start, and it's amazing.
I know, it's weird.
Technology.
It's weird. So any of you watching live will notice we have a slightly different format to the stream now, and this is because YouTube is getting rid of Hangouts on Air later this year, which is what we depended on to do the live stream, and they're not replacing it with something that does something just like Hangouts on Air, which is disappointing, but very Google-like. So we've had to we've forcibly been moved into trying something new, so we're trying out OBS tonight. Streaming that way, which means a lot more complexity on my end. So I'm hoping this is working well. So, otherwise,
This is fun. You keep cutting in and out on my side.
Oh, that's awesome. Probably because the stream is live now.
Really interesting to try to understand you.
Oh, good. Well, the best I can say is I hope that's not happening on the live feed. We'll figure it out for next time. I don't want to be troubleshooting. If it gets to be a real problem, I'll just stop sending video, and we'll send audio only from me to you. Does that sound good?
Yeah. I mean,
Good.
I can't figure out exactly what I do. Audio or video on this all the time, and it's not an issue. So, anyway.
Well, I could talk all about the difference, but we'll save that for after the show. All right, so let's go ahead and get into the news, and we'll go from there. Sound good? Say yes. Say that sounds great.
Yes, it sounds great.
On the bright side, I can hear you fine.
So that's good. That means it's recording. So,
that means it's recording. So, all right. So, we got from Vice, article from Vice about a do-it-yourself internet network has drastically expanded its coverage in New York City. So, what is this? A mesh that was set up by the community?
Yeah, so I guess my understanding, and I've heard of this. I mean, this isn't new per se. It's been around for a while. It's just they're starting to expand, I guess, more rapidly. But they basically got fed up with the wonderful service that you can get in New York, and decided to go out on their own and make their own mesh. So it's in Brooklyn and Manhattan. It's called NYC Mesh, and it's a wireless. I mean, mesh. It's a wireless mesh.
I would hope.
I don't know. I don't know exactly how, like, what the upstreams are or what it looks like. But I guess the rates aren't horrible. According to this, the rate sheet says it's like either $20 or $50. And it's optional, which makes it even more interesting. So it's a donation of $20 or $50 for a residential user, or $100 for a business. And then you have to pay for like a one-time install, if you will. It's $110 for the router, including the antenna, and $50 to install it.
So this is access you can get like at your business, like at a stationary point that is a client on this mesh. Is that the way you're describing this?
Yes.
That's neat.
Yeah. So I mean, think of think of like your cable modem or your DSL, except this is wireless.
So what? Somebody somewhere has a gateway to the internet, and they have gatewayed this mesh to some sort of a high bandwidth connection to the internet, some kind of backbone, and then the mesh is just sort of covering the city or part of the city.
Right. So it's mesh, and I'm wondering if there's multiple. I mean, depending on how they did it, they could have multiple upstreams in distributed locations. I mean, it all depends on how they set up the routing. And actually, I think I may be wrong, but I think one of our DC 610 members was in on this when it first started.
Oh, really?
If I remember, he was talking. I'm pretty sure this is what he was talking about. He was one of the guys that helped start this whole thing back in 2013, I think it was.
That's pretty awesome.
Yeah, so it's I guess it's growing strong.
Well, maybe we'll have to follow up with him, and maybe we can have him talk about it on the show sometime. Might be fun.
I would be happy to join this as well. So if you guys can set up an antenna that can get here, I'll send you $50 a month, no problem.
Yeah, right. If you can get a mesh all the way, south of New York City, south of New York border into Pennsylvania, that'd be great. Just keep extending that mesh till it gets to us.
Yep. So
what could go wrong? It'd be perfect.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, so I guess the new install is a Super Node 3 antenna, which has 50 times the capacity of the original node. So
it's interesting.
Single point of failure, but I'm sure they're going to fix that over time.
No, why would they do that?
Yeah, I mean, I'm interested.
Cool.
So you heard it here. You can, if you're fed up with Verizon and whoever the other carriers are in your area, just do it yourself.
Indeed, do it yourself. I mean, I guess this works well in a city. I don't know how well it would work in a more rural area. But I mean, we could certainly cover like the town we're living in.
Yeah, so I mean, we did the wireless ISP thing back in the day, and in a city is a little bit different because it's highly reflective surfaces because of all the buildings.
Yeah.
And I think that actually works in their favor, because the signal, the signal is a bit stronger. In a rural area like we're in, the problem is the trees.
Well, yeah, trees are dense and they're made of wood.
Yep.
Wood doesn't.
It has nothing to do with the wood. It's the water in the trees. The trees absorb the wireless signal.
Neat.
And it makes it very difficult to do widespread wireless. But
so you'd have to
if you have a mesh setup.
You'd have to be above the trees, and then you'd have range problems because you're up too high.
Right, but if it's mesh and you have a lot of low areas that have relative line of sight, you may actually be okay.
But then where would you put your mesh points? Like you'd have to get clearance from.
I think it would be weird, but in our area, I think it's particularly dense with trees and foliage. But
you're literally in the woods
where there's lots of houses, but not as much tree cover. I think it works a little bit better.
Yeah. No, that's cool.
Yes, very.
So we're going to start the Iron Sysadmin net, and it's going to start here in Northeast PA, and it's going to expand to cover the entire state, even those areas that are nothing but trees. You'll have internet access in the trees.
It'll be iron mesh. All of our radios are going to be a little bit more expensive, but they're going to be made out of like iron.
Oh, right.
You may have to enhance your house a little bit. Your roof has to be able to handle the amount of weight that we're going to put on.
The amount of iron in the iron net.
Wonderful.
It'll be wonderful. Yes, that'd be awesome. Okay, I think we've officially lost track of the article. So moving on.
There was an article?
There was an article. This is kind of cool. The Pentagon loves you. This is from technologyreview.com. Oh, MIT Technology Review. Okay, cool. The Pentagon has a lasers, that can identify people from a distance by their heartbeat.
It's the Jetson prototype.
Nice. So,
I'm not sure what the Jetsons have at all to do with that.
well, it's all future-y like.
Yeah. Okay. Gotcha.
You know, so they were yeah.
It can pick up your unique cardiac signature from 200 meters away.
Yeah.
Through your clothes. See, the government is looking through your clothes.
I feel violated. So, is your heartbeat really that unique from person to person?
Yes. Yeah. Apparently, it's as unique as your eye or your fingerprint.
That's interesting. I would think heartbeats could only be so unique. Like, there's got to be two people on the planet that have a similar heartbeat or the same heartbeat. No, I mean it's like a thump.
I think you're thinking of the actual beats per minute. This is
further.
It's almost like the sound, I guess, that the heart makes.
Interesting. Yeah, I guess.
I don't know it quite well enough, but I think.
I wonder if
similar to that.
I wonder if a person's level of physical fitness changes that. Like if I'm a big overweight slob and I decide to get my act together and I go lose 110 pounds and become a distance runner, my heartbeat's going to beat differently than it did. Or is it not?
Again, you're thinking about beat.
Well, I'm not necessarily, right?
I don't think the shape of your heart ever changes.
Well, no. Well, it could because your heart can be like encased in fat if you're really overweight, which I think would change the way it beats. Not just the frequency that it beats at, but how it beats. That's why an overweight person can have an unhealthy heart, mainly because it has to work harder, but also because it becomes fatty. But if you're fit, or if you're overweight and become fit, or if you're fit and become overweight, that could change the overall physics of your heart, I would think.
Yeah, well, this apparently uses laser vibrometry. Caused by the heart. So if that's the case, and it's actually the surface of the heart itself, then
that's interesting.
Any layer of fat around it doesn't matter.
I don't know. I mean, I'm not a cardiovascular expert. It just seems to me that would change the physics of your heartbeat. I don't know. I also don't fully understand how this works, but it is pretty neat and it is kind of scary.
Yeah, more beams from the government being shot at my body.
Well, the other thing is, like, there's a fingerprint database of all of us, from when you had your fingerprints taken when you were in kindergarten or something, unless they're not doing that anymore. But I remember when I was a kid, they took all of our fingerprints because, if we got stolen or something, they wanted to have our fingerprints.
Right.
Which was really just so that the law enforcement would have our fingerprints from when we were young and couldn't say no. But they didn't, that I'm aware of, they didn't take any readings from my heart. So they don't have a database in which to compare heartbeats to, at least not yet.
That you know of.
So that we know of. You are correct. I could be wrong.
So all those contrails that you see in the sky, that's the planes flying over getting your heartbeat.
Oh, the chemtrails. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, it gets everybody's heartbeat, and then it drops those chemicals down to calm everybody down.
I'm not going to go into that. I actually had a conversation with a guy at a Jeep Jamboree who firmly believed that. Since I was representing Jeep Jamboree, I just had to calmly go, okay, yep.
Yeah. Okay.
Didn't want to get in an argument with one of the participants. So, anyway.
Might as well. Okay, well, hey. Speaking of government, NASA is going to start launching drones.
Yay, NASA. I was, just earlier today, I was on a Red Hat Accelerators call with someone from NASA because they were talking about OpenStack. It's pretty fun. Anyway, related only in that it was NASA, and this is from NASA.
Yep.
Okay,
so,
go ahead. More NASA, robots on Mars, or Titan anyway.
Yep. No, well, is it? Yeah, Titan. Saturn.
Titan. Oh, right. See, yeah. Mars is Phobos and Deimos, right? I only remember that because of Doom.
Yes, right. So they're going to send a quadcopter. I'm saying quad rotor drone.
Is it a quadcopter or is it a drone? Because it all depends on, the context and whether you want to call it evil or not.
Rotors and it flies.
Good. Sounds good.
And we're gonna go monitor all of the aliens on Titan, and I'm sure there'll be missiles at some point fired down at them because government drones, you got to fire something.
Have we given up on Mars at this point? Why don't we send a quadcopter to Mars?
Probably has to do with the atmosphere. So.
Oh yeah, I guess I didn't even consider that.
Yeah, my guess is that whatever the atmosphere is on Titan, it is. There's enough of an atmosphere for a drone to be able to do something. Let's
see your quadcopter fly with no atmosphere. Does it work that way? I thought. Well, no. I guess yeah. If there's no.
Yeah, I guess Titan has a nitrogen-heavy atmosphere.
Yet another thing I am not an expert in, which I cannot I cannot speak intelligently on. But yeah, I never even thought of that. Atmosphere matters.
Yeah, I think this is just cool because I mean, if you think about it, it's far enough away that they're going to have to program the drone where to go, when to, like what path it's going to take and everything else, and it's going to do all of that and then send that information back. So they're going to have to send packets of like, go do this thing, sort of what they were doing with the rovers on Mars. This one is rovers on Mars were like turn left, turn right, go straight, go backwards.
Yeah, there's a lot of altitude and
altitude and velocity, and you get to deal with all that stuff. Man. So
that's gonna take some heavy calculations. Good thing it's NASA doing this. I mean,
worse is I don't know how Titan is, but I mean the stuff that we send into space can't be like, we can't send the latest i7. Yeah, we can't send the latest i7 processor into space and expect it to work, because apparently these weird rays from space rays come and destroy it very rapidly.
That wouldn't be good.
So we have to send like this we send this armored technology up there, which tends to be much slower and older than current tech.
Why can't they armor the current tech? Come on. It doesn't have to be old. I guess I'm sure it's harder. It's more difficult than that.
It has to do with dissipating the heat, because dissipating heat in space is like not easy.
Once again, atmosphere.
Yeah. So maybe they're able to put, like, encase this thing in lead and send it to Titan, and then when it lands on Titan, it melts the lead and comes out, and it works fine. I don't know.
There you go.
But they're expecting a 2.5-year mission. This thing's going to go about 110 miles or so.
Yeah.
We'll know the results of it somewhere in 2035.
You're kidding me.
Of course, we will be way too busy dealing with the end of the epoch and patching all of our systems. Hopefully they remember that before they send this thing up.
2035. My gosh.
It's not launching till 2026.
Oh, okay.
I can't think in terms like that. I mean, that's 7 years from now.
I mean,
I have no idea what I'm going to do in 7 years.
How can you even plan like a career of the people working on it? Like, okay, you and I work at NASA. We have this great idea to send a quadcopter to NASA, or to Titan, right? We're like, yeah, let's work on that. We get a team built. We design the thing. We get it launched. It's now 2026, right? We spent all that time working to get the thing launched. It's going to be, what, 10 years? No, it's going to be, what, 8 years, right? You said 2032?
2034.
2034. So it's going to be, like 8 years.
8 years.
And then, like, all those people could have moved away from NASA. They could have went and got other jobs. They could have been hit by buses, whatever. I hope they took good notes. What?
Look at the Mars rovers. I mean, that was a decade of planning.
Yeah.
The thing was flying and
I guess they're good at this.
So looking down at the discussion, because it's always fun to read the comments. One of the comments is, how are they going to get 110 miles out of this thing? That's a lot of range. And the pictures in the article don't show things like solar panels or anything.
Well, they're renderings. Come on.
No, right, but usually their renderings are relatively accurate.
Yeah, right.
And one of the one of the commenters replied back, and I think this came right from the article, and I missed it. But you can't really do solar power on Titan because the atmosphere is hazy.
Oh yeah.
This thing's gonna have an MMRTG, which is not a new type of video game.
What's that?
Multi-mission radioisotope thermoelectric generator.
Holy crap! MMRTG.
It's gonna have
an onboard MMORPG. Okay, cool.
Yeah, it's gonna. Yes. It's gonna have its own little thermonuclear reactor.
That's awesome.
So
some life form on Titan is gonna think we're attacking them with this thermonuclear detonator. Yep. It's really just a quadcopter we're using to explore. That's awesome.
Yep. So I'm gonna let you handle this transition.
Well, thanks a lot.
You're welcome.
From drones that can spy on you to fake nudes. How's that?
Okay, that works. I just saw this today, and apparently this was like a rapid rise and fall. So you've heard of deepfakes, that wonderful AI generated video stuff that you can make anybody say anything and whatever. So this guy, he's apparently anonymous, created something that he called Deep Nude.
Okay.
And it used AI. It took a picture of like a clothed female.
Mm-hmm.
And it used AI to digitally remove her clothes.
Oh, so this
show a photorealistic image of what that person would look like naked.
So this wasn't putting their head on someone's body or whatever like the other deepfakes have been. This was literally like making conjectures as to what this individual person would look like naked.
Yes.
Wow.
And
what happens if they're wearing baggy clothes? Do they just look all funny?
I don't know. The app is gone, and
probably a good thing.
I found out about it only because it came up, and I found the article because basically what happened was this guy who created it and I guess he had a crisis of conscience. And decided that the app was being misused.
What did he think? What did he think was going to come out of this app? I mean,
he had safety measures. He put a watermark on it that said fake, so nobody will use it.
Oh, okay.
Nobody would abuse it if it says fake on it.
Did it make a picture or like a live recording?
It was just a picture.
If it was a picture, yeah, you couldn't possibly remove that watermark.
Right.
Not at all. That's not a thing I've done in the past.
You're going to like this. So he decided that despite the safety measures, the probability that people would misuse it is too high, and he didn't want to make money that way. And he said, surely it's going to be out there and people are going to share it, but they don't want to be the ones to sell it. And he capped it off with downloading the software from other sources or sharing it by other means would be against the terms of their website. So, of course, that's going to stop it up.
Well, yeah. I mean, everybody listens to terms and conditions, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, the terms said I can't use this to release naked pictures of people that didn't give me consent, so obviously I won't do that.
Right, and he's not releasing new versions, and he's not granting anyone use of that software anymore. And the license to activate the premium version is being disabled as well. I have not been able to, again, I spent 30 seconds on this, but I haven't really dug into what the premium version did. I think, based on what I've seen, the premium version just meant that there were no black bars over the naughty bits.
Obviously, the premium version removed the watermark.
No, I don't think so. I think the
I'm
was the whole
kidding.
thing.
I'm kidding.
Had a watermark the whole time.
I'm kidding.
Um,
Oh, so you don't actually
or-
get any good bits without paying? Is that what you're saying?
I guess.
Or good fake bits?
Although apparently this apparently was a Python app, and they bypassed the registration with 2 lines of Python.
Well, yeah. That's
So,
nice.
And there's a note in here. This goes on about, whether it was wrong of them to create it, and people fall on both sides of this. But there was a note on this because the guy, basically, it was like the guy was like, "Oh, I can't do this. I feel bad for having created this." And there's a note in here that says that the app only worked on women.
Well, nobody wants to see naked guys.
Well, but it says if you tried to use it on a photo of a man,
did it turn him
it
into
just
a woman?
added female genitalia to him.
That's awesome.
So apparently, this was designed to make nude women and nude women only. So,
or make nude men
apparently
nude women.
It's dead, quote dead at this point. But I'm sure it'll be out there for eternity now.
Yeah, I'm sure someone has a copy of this thing.
Oh, I'm sure it's floating around everywhere. So,
I'm really curious to see how the pictures looked.
There's a couple different news articles from reputable sources that have examples, and it looks exactly the way you would think it would.
Yeah.
I mean,
well, I guess
there were a couple of them depending on the clothing, and I guess like you can't see different parts, but some of the clothing had like strings on it.
Mm-hmm.
So presumably it removed where the clothing was on the body, but the strings are still coming off the side of the person.
Why does that woman's butt have tassels?
Yes, exactly. Yeah. So,
that's
yeah,
weird.
but I mean, overall, it's there's a bit of outrage on it.
Well, yeah, I mean, so I am curious of the job it did simply because, like, this is a thing that hasn't been done before, and I'm curious to see how good of a job it did. Not because I'm trying to be a pervert. But yeah, absolutely, this is a bad thing. I mean, anything that can...
From this article and other articles that I've looked at about this, apparently it does a good enough job to make it look real.
Yeah.
It's just like the deepfakes thing. Like, if you don't know what you're looking for,
yeah,
you would think it's real.
Yeah.
Which, and is it surprising that something like this came out? Not really. I mean, it's they're able to do this with other things. It doesn't really surprise me that they were able to do this.
Look at the terrible things that happen online, and look at the way the adult industry has gone. I mean, like, there was a time when, like, one of the most popular things that you could get in adult film was, like, people spying on people. Right? Yeah. And, like, that's creepy. That's just really creepy, and it breaks so many ethical rules, I guess.
Ethical. It actually breaks the law.
It breaks the law as well, right? So, I mean, argue whether they were real or not, but, I mean, that's creepy. This is the new level of that. Because, perverts will be perverts, I guess. Just creepy stuff. All right, and on that note, I think we finished the news, unless we want to talk more about how creepy that is and the sort of experience Jason and I have with looking at the darker side of the web.
No, but I think we may have set a land speed record for news.
I know. Well, let's see. We've been live. It's been half an hour.
Okay.
Since we went live. I don't know.
Go us.
We were silent for a bit of that. Yay, news! All right, we're going to transition now.
Is there like a cool OBS transition that you use? Like, do we pop out in 3D and spin and come right back? Or...
No, not quite. Though we could do things like pause for a break and go back to the waiting screen, and then people can't hear us, and we go visit the bathroom or get another beer or whatever. So like that's cool stuff we can do, and I believe we can put music in, like during that waiting screen we could have had like hold music essentially, but I haven't gone that far yet.
Well, let us know what you think of the new format, I
Yeah.
guess, or the new look.
Yeah, so like I mentioned,
listening to us as a podcast, you've noticed.
They're like, what are you talking about? So if you want to see what the heck we're talking about, hop on over to YouTube, youtube.com/Iron Sysadmin Podcast, and you can just look at this episode number 63, and you can see what the differences are. Basically, we went from Hangouts on Air, which was just a very simple, it did, highlighting whichever one of us was speaking would show up as highlighted on the video, and it was a really simple way to stream. I didn't have to worry about anything other than starting the stream up. It handled the video and voice call that we were doing, and it also streamed via YouTube. It didn't use a bunch of bandwidth. It didn't give us a lot of flexibility, but, whatever. It was good enough for what we were doing here. I had thought for a long time about switching to something a little more complex like OBS because it lets us do transitions and it lets us do scenes, and gives a little more flexibility with the video and stuff. And yes, as you've mentioned in the chat, Jason, we have a nice little chat hovering above the stream now, which is kind of fun.
Yep.
So if you chat with us on live on the video, which no one is tonight because we're recording on Thursday instead of Wednesday, and no one thought to watch us, I guess. Maybe we're conflicting with some other awesomer show, like Paul or something. Anyway, you can see the chat show up, although it has this stupid community guidelines thing that I can't get rid of.
Yeah, that's part of the...
It's annoying.
I'm not sure how it's doing. It's almost like it's scraping...
That's exactly what it's doing.
Page. Yeah,
so the chat window that's on there is a source in OBS, which is basically, it mimics a browser. So when I start the live stream, I literally copy the URL for the chat and paste it into the browser thing in OBS, and it puts it there. It removes the background and stuff, so it's transparent.
I'm sure the OBS devs are listening to us right now.
Absolutely. Absolutely. My experience with OBS came from, I tried doing some game streaming with Twitch because I was curious about it. And there's a plugin for OBS which will integrate so seamlessly with Twitch's chat that they literally just like pop up and they fade out and you can color them, and it's really cool. And I was hoping YouTube had the same thing, and they don't. It doesn't have the same integration. It's probably just because of the way YouTube does their chat or something, and Twitch does it differently or better in some way. But maybe we'll just move to Twitch. How's that sound? Forget this YouTube crap.
yeah. And then after, like, by the time we move to Twitch, that'll be the old thing, and there'll be something new, like, I don't know.
Right. Totally. We're just
new.
I
can't think of a funny name.
We're just gonna jump from streaming platform to streaming platform and then call it good.
Yeah, we're never going to Facebook Live, so I refuse to.
I mean, the cool thing is we can output from OBS. We can output to so many things. We can output to Twitch. We can output to YouTube. You can probably output to Facebook Live. Anything that supports an external encoder, we can output to, which gives us some options, which is pretty cool.
Options are fun.
So, at any rate, aside from OBS, some of you might have noticed that we had a little poll since our last episode. So after we talked to Jack 2 weeks ago, right? 2 weeks ago? I had this great idea. I was curious for some feedback from folks about basically what parts of the show they like. So I just threw together a quick Twitter poll in about 2 seconds of thinking, and I put together the things that we generally cover on the show, and I asked people which ones they liked the most. After thinking about this, I think it would have been more useful to have people rank what they liked about the show instead of just giving them one vote. Rank these 1 to 4. 4 being the most liked or something like that. But, whatever. What we have is what we have.
Do a Twitter poll ranking thing?
We can't do that on Twitter poll. Yeah. That's what I'm saying. We would have had to have done something a little more, what's the word I'm looking for? A little more advanced than a Twitter poll. But anyway,
Jack, I know you're listening, Jack, and if you could put this feature into Twitter for us, we would very much appreciate it. We'll send the new poll out in a week using this new feature that you're going to create just for us.
I'm not sure how Jack would do that.
Well, he runs Twitter. Like, he can't just...
No, I was not...
Some code, right?
What are you talking about? You must be talking about some other Jack. I'm talking about the Jack we interviewed on the show 2 weeks ago, who does not run Twitter.
No. I'm talking about Jack, the guy that owns Twitter.
Oh, I didn't know the guy.
Fix that for us.
I didn't know the
he
guy that
listens to
owns
us
Twitter
too.
is named Jack. Okay, good.
Yeah.
Okay.
Dorsey, right?
I don't know.
Boy, am I going to sound stupid if this is wrong?
It's actually a woman named Jane.
No. Yes. Jack Dorsey, CEO of Twitter, with the beard and the... Yeah.
Okay. You obviously know more about the inner workings of
Hi,
Twitter
Jack.
than I do. Yeah, he's obviously a listener, and he's listening, and he's going to fix that by next time. Then we're going to have a new poll. So
He's
anyway...
like that guy that was on MySpace that followed everybody. I forget
Tom.
his name. Tom.
Yeah.
I never had a MySpace account, so...
Yeah. Well, you didn't miss much. So, anyway, the results. The results of said poll are that you folks like the guests and interviews that we've done, which are, of all of the shows that we've done, is probably the least used segment we've ever, because we don't do a lot of interviews.
Yeah.
So maybe we're going to try to do more. I don't know. I asked for 4 things. One was news coverage, Sysadmin Stories, which we've shared a number of, guests and interviews, which was 1, and of course, technical deep dives. And Jason added more XENOPHAGE, which got a 99%
Yes.
out of.
Yeah, weird.
So
apparently the poll is broken.
We've got 199% votes, 99% being for more XENOPHAGE. So 32% of you said you like guest interviews the most, or like that the best. That's how I phrased the question. 26%, 2 of the items are tied, Sysadmin Stories and Technical Deep Dives, and 16% news coverage. So I guess either that means we do a bad job of covering the news, or people don't care that we cover the news, or that I simply have a badly crafted poll and we need a better way to find this out.
It's your fault.
So I'm not about to suggest that we stop covering the news, because I don't think that's what people want. If anybody wants us to stop covering the news, let me know. If anyone has suggestions on how we could better, cater to what you want to hear, let us know. Maybe we can craft a better poll of some sort. I don't know. This was really just sort of like off the cuff. I thought, I'm curious. I've asked things like this of listeners in the past, and we never got a good result. Just because there weren't a lot of people watching for said things, but we have more listeners now, and that's cool. So I figured I'd ask again. I don't know that this is going to directly change anything. Maybe we'll shuffle up how we do the show. Maybe we'll do news at the end. Maybe we'll do less news. Maybe we'll just do it the same way we are now. I did get one person tweeted at me and said, "Don't change anything. I like it the way it is." So nobody else did that. I don't know if that means no one else cares. So if you feel strongly about the format of the show, let us know. I think that's all we have for announcements. I don't know that... Did your cool review alert service tell you we have any new reviews? I didn't go looking.
No. People, leave reviews. Come on.
Yeah. Then that's not because we're trying to climb the climb the Apple Podcast charts. It's simply because we want to hear feedback. We want to know what you guys like and what you don't. Same reason I made that poll. So either review it or send us an email, podcast@ironsysadmin.com, if you want to send us some direct feedback with comments or suggestions. If you guys don't tell us, we won't really know what you want us to cover or how you want the show to be. And I guess silence would be complacence.
Well, we're shouting into the darkness here. We're just curious if anybody's listening.
Yeah, right. So that's really what it is. We're doing the best we can. We had some decently positive feedback from folks we have talked to, and that's cool. We're not asking for negative feedback, but if you have any suggestions or if there's anything you'd like us to do differently or do more of or less of, just let us know, and we'll try to incorporate that. Because we do this because, we want you guys to enjoy the show. All right, so enough on that. I found the craziest, well, not craziest, one of the funniest how-to videos I think I've ever come across. And what makes it funny is that it's actually serious. So I was browsing around Twitter, I think, and I ran across a tweet from somebody. And it's this video from GE about how to factory reset your smart light bulb. Your C by GE light bulb. I'm going to start playing the video. You guys should be able to hear it momentarily.
Welcome to C by GE's Smart Tips. We're going to show you how to factory reset your C by GE bulbs, which will unpair your bulb from other devices and apps that it's connected to. There are 2 factory reset processes, which depend on the generation of bulbs and the firmware you're running on. Here's the first process.
Got good music in the background,
for bulbs
too.
With this package,
Very trendy.
or for firmware version 2.8 or later.
Your light bulb has firmware,
Start
people.
with your bulb off for at least 5 seconds. Then turn on the bulb for 8 seconds.
This is where it gets exciting.
Turn off for 2 seconds. Turn on for 8 seconds. Turn off for 2 seconds. Turn on for 8 seconds.
So I'm just going to let this play in the background a bit while we chat. Can you guys still hear it? I hope so.
Turn off.
Jason, can you hear it?
Seconds.
Yep, I can hear it. You're doing
on
good. You
for 8
figured out how a
seconds.
mixer works.
Totally. So it's still going, by the way. So the reset
Off for 2 seconds.
procedure is to turn on your bulb,
for 8 seconds.
to turn it off, and then on again, and then off again, and on again, and it goes through this sequence like 6 times,
Then turn it on one last time.
and then it blinks.
The bulb will
And-
flash on
And,
off.
and, and,
But
and
wait.
that's for the one
to
firmware
show
version.
if the reset was successful. If it doesn't, your bulb may be running on an older version of firmware and will need to try the second factory reset process, which is designed for C by GE bulbs with this package
And it
or
shows
for
the different
firmware
package, of
version
course.
2.7 or earlier. Ready? Okay, start with your bulb off for at least 5 seconds.
Okay, so I'll spoiler alert.
Then
It's the exact
turn
same
off the bulb
procedure,
for 8
except you're turning it
seconds.
off for different numbers of seconds.
Yeah.
And it's more confusing. Like the last one was turn it on for 5 seconds, I think, and then off for 8,
Turn
on
on
for
for
2,
2
off for 8, on for 2, off for
Turn
8. And
off
it was
for
very
2
easy to
seconds.
follow. You just had to keep doing that. 8, 2, 8,
Turn
2.
on for 2 seconds.
This one's like 2,
Turn
8,
off for
2,
2 seconds.
6, 8, 5.
Turn on for 2 seconds. Turn off for 2 seconds.
So
On for 8
when I saw
seconds.
this, so the commentary around this was really funny because a lot of people were.
Turn off for 2
I
seconds.
think I saw the Geneva Convention
Turn on for
mentioned
8
at least once. Torture was mentioned multiple times.
Turn off for 2 seconds.
And you
And
know
then turn it
what the
on
hell were
one
they
last
thinking?
The bulb will flash on and
Lots
off
of interesting
3 times
commentary.
if it has been
So on the
successfully
one
reset.
hand,
For more smart tips about
the-
our smart products, go to
the on off, like I mean, so it's a light bulb. What inputs do you have to be able to do anything with it at all?
Yeah, so I get that.
So turning it on and off is actually kind of, excuse the pun, but kind of brilliant.
I get that. Okay, so here's the thing, though. It's a smart light bulb. It has circuitry inside. It has Bluetooth controller. It has software so that it's able... Firmware, sorry. Because firmware is somehow different than software because it's firmer. Does it work out more? Why couldn't they put a button on the side of the stupid thing?
You should see the pecs on my firmware.
Yes! My light bulb has awesome pecs.
Well, because people aren't going to know what to do with a button on a light bulb. So like the on-off sequence is okay. It just doesn't need to be on-off.
Well,
20
I
times.
get it. So what they were trying to do is make sure that you didn't accidentally trigger this by turning the bulb on and off quickly. So they have this crazy sequence that's a little too convoluted. And
I get it, but when I'm turning a bulb on and off, it's pretty consistent, like on off, on off,
yeah,
on off.
it's not 8 seconds, then 2 seconds,
On,
then 8 seconds.
off, 8 seconds, on 2 seconds. At that point, like if I've done it twice, I'm trying to do something with the bulb.
What's even better is that in the comments, or in the Twitter comments, somebody said I guess they were looking around GE's website to actually find this, to see if it was for real or not, and it is. But they found like troubleshooting docs afterward, like, you know, if this didn't work, like question and answer sort of stuff, like people writing in saying, I did this and it didn't work. And the usual answer was, maybe you're not counting right. So apparently it's sensitive enough that if you do it for like 9 seconds instead of 8, it's not going to work. And they even said, like, try counting or try saying Mississippi in the middle of your numbers. Like, is this grade school?
So what I find really funny about the video is that that when they're going through the sequence, they're counting. Like when they say off for 2 seconds, they wait 2 seconds.
Yeah.
On for 8 seconds, they
and then
wait 8
yes,
seconds.
the video counts down from 8 to 0, and it has a little graph on it that counts down. So those pauses in the video were that, if you were listening that closely while we were talking. So yeah, I don't know. I get the smart light bulb thing. I understand why this is a thing, but I had to chuckle when I first watched it and it said about firmware, resetting the firmware in your light bulb, because, you know, we're from a generation where firmware in light bulbs was not a thing. My kids will probably be like, why isn't there firmware in the light bulbs? Or their kids.
I like this comment. To reset your light bulb, you need to look like someone with OCD. If you have older firmware, you need to look like an impatient person with OCD.
Nice. So anyway, that was my entertainment for this week.
Yeah, it's disturbing the number of things that have firmware in them now.
Yeah,
I've seen there are actually Apple's chargers have firmware in them of some sort.
Really? Usually it was the job of the device you plugged in to be smart enough to, like, do things like turn off the charger.
If I understood correctly, there's a very low, I mean, it never gets updated or anything, but apparently it's a very low level firmware in like the chargers themselves.
Wow.
Not the first device I've seen like that.
Yeah, it's not the first time I've heard of that.
But there's firmware in damn near everything.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, you know, that's welcome to today's world.
Well, I mean, everything needs to be smart now. And I mean, that's progress, right? But it does add more complexity to just about everything you interact with, which is kind of a shame.
Yep.
That's just me.
Yep. As long as I get my light bulb on the internet, I'm good.
I don't want my light bulbs on the internet. Because we'll find out later that all of the GE light bulbs have cameras in them, and they've been watching us all this time. Sort of like,
right.
What was it that we covered? Was it the Nest? Something had a microphone in it that nobody knew had a microphone.
The Nest.
I forget what it was.
Something from Google, I think.
Yeah, because I remember it not being all that surprising because it was from Google.
I'm just thinking of my tech support days when I had a guy on the phone who was this will date it. He was on IRC and was talking to me like he had called into tech support. They said he was on IRC talking to somebody, and they were describing the clothes he was wearing and all this stuff. And he's like, "Can they see me through my monitor?"
Yes, totally.
Like, no, they were cold reading you. Like, this is a technique that's been around for like hundreds of years.
Yeah, right. I mean,
for your monitor.
It's funny because just this past week, my mom had watched my kids and my sister's kid for a weekend, and they went out to McDonald's or something, and this old guy had come up to my sister's son, and he said, "I bet I can guess your name if you give me a high five," or whatever it was, or if you punch me in the hand or something like that. And the kid did it, and he's like, "Your name is such and such," right? And he got the kid's name right. Well, what it really meant was that my mom had told the kid to, like, get in line or to do whatever. And this guy just happened to notice. But it's the exact same thing, right? You just pick up on the world around you, and then you can do things that seem amazing. So yeah, same deal. Same deal. Cold reading. Except I guess that wasn't very cold reading. It was just that my mom yelled like, "Get over here!"
Child.
Child.
With his name.
Child X. Yeah, I just don't want to release my nephew's name on the internet. I'm sure you guys can all find it.
George. It's George.
George. His name is George. It's not that far off. That's another boring name like that.
I don't remember your nephew's name. So
You may not know it. I'll tell you later.
I might not.
Okay. So anyway, I guess we can move along into the main topic. What do you think?
Press the button.
Press the button. Press the button, Frank. You know what that's from, right? You better.
Yes.
Okay. If any listeners know what that's
movie.
from, if any listeners know what that is from, push the button, Frank. I need you to write in to podcast at Iron Sysadmin or tweet us or something, and I think I have stickers. I'll send you a sticker. And if I don't have enough stickers, sorry, I may not send you a sticker.
It's not from what I thought it was. Okay.
It's not from what you thought it was?
No.
Did Googling it find it for you? Because that's going to really cheapen this.
Well, no. I
Totally not.
I compressed time and spent a long time doing OSINT trying to determine what this meant.
All right, so no cheating, folks. All right, so a week ago or so, I was surfing around Twitter. You might catch that I do this from time to time. I came across a tweet from Nixcraft, which is a blog, I believe. That's all they do. Or they, news site, or I mean, not news site, but whatever. They're like a article site, not necessarily news, where they, they release Unix-related and Linux-related articles. And they were talking about locking down SSH. And the exchange that I saw in the comments, or not the comments, but the thread on Twitter, really made me wonder how many people really have a good plan for locking down such an important service. So I recently got involved in this new project from Red Hat called Enable Sysadmin. Like it's meant to be a play on like the system control stuff, system control enable thing. So Enable Sysadmin. And it's basically like people can contribute articles and then they'll publish them, and then you can publish them on your own blog or whatever if you want to. But it's basically a sort of like Nixcraft, where you get to write an article and they'll publish it for you. So I wrote an article for my own blog and I submitted it to them about locking down SSH. And I covered a couple of the best practices that I've used over the years, and I gave people a little bit of a background as to what SSH is and why it's important that we protect it and whatnot. So I don't know how deep we want to go into what SSH is or why you protect it, because, I don't know, I feel like people listening to the show should know that, but maybe we should at least go briefly into that, right? So SSH is I don't know how deep into history I want to go here. There used to be... Shell. Yes, secure shell. So it used to be that when you wanted to manage a server or something that you did via text or via a shell, you would use something like rlogin or telnet or one of these other unencrypted unencrypted protocols. If you ever logged into a BBS or something over the internet, you probably used telnet, and that's how we managed Linux servers in the late 90s. Like as late as 98 or so. In, I think it was 99, this came out of OpenBSD. OpenSSH was a thing, and it was a fork of a different project, if I remember correctly. Or did someone else fork OpenSSH? I read this when I was reading the article, but I dismissed it for some reason. Anyway, so basically SSH, or what we're talking about specifically, is OpenSSH, because that's the implementation of secure shell that you'll find on most Linux systems, and that's what I wrote the article around, is basically an encrypted tunnel between you and your server, and it gives you access to your shell, whatever shell you've decided you want to use, whether that's Bash or whatever. In most cases, that'll be bash. So that's basically the background of what SSH and OpenSSH is and what they accomplish. They're very, very powerful tools, as you'd expect, and they enable a lot of other tools like tunneling and automation with things like Ansible. You can even do like file synchronizations and whatnot over SSH. It's a very versatile tool because it just gives you this encrypted tunnel that you can do lots of things over. So obviously you would protect this because of the amount of power it gives you. If somebody breaks into SSH on your server, whether they got a privileged account or not, it's pretty much game over. Would you agree?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So
I mean, it's if you can get in on SSH, you've got shell access. I mean, whether you have a root account or not,
escalation from there.
Local privilege escalations are kind of a dime a dozen. So
yeah. Now, obviously, there are other ways to get a shell. SSH is just the one that's most direct, right? So if you set up a server and you connect it to the internet and it has port 22 open, people are going to start attacking it pretty quickly. In fact, for this...
You're wrong. See, because it's got secure in the name.
It's got secure in the name. Nobody will hit it.
The world, and it's fine.
So what I did, and I have a link in the show notes to the article that I wrote, because I'm vain like that, narcissist and all. I went to DigitalOcean, which is where I host my own stuff, and I set up a new droplet, and I didn't apply a security group to it. So it was basically just all the ports were open to the internet. And I didn't do anything with it. I literally just started it up. It was a CentOS box. I didn't do any configuration other than logging in. I logged into the thing, and I started tailing varlog messages. No, varlog secure, to watch for SSH attempts. It took, I think, an hour, and people were brute forcing SSH. That quickly. Now, obviously, that's a cloud provider. Their IP block is probably well known and scanned all the time for anything that's live that comes up with SSH open. But the point is, if you put a machine on the internet with with port 22 open, people are going to start attacking it, and they're not even covert about it. I mean, in the blog entry, the user that they tried to log in with was literally called fake. So why anybody would try that username, I don't know.
But yeah, I mean, actually, I think an hour is a little slow.
It was probably a probe. I saw
the hackers had their day off.
The first probe I saw to SSH that didn't come from me was about 20 minutes in, if I remember correctly. Like 20 minutes after I booted it up. But the actual onslaught of attacks came roughly an hour after I started the thing up. So it's important, okay? If you're not protecting SSH, people are going to try to attack it. And if you're really lucky, they won't get in. But they probably will, unless you have really secure passwords. But there's a number of things you can do to try to lock it down. And that's what I thought we would talk about tonight. And we'll take our time, go through each one, go through some of the caveats, things like that. So, number one on my list is don't freaking leave port 22 open to the world. Just don't.
But Nate, how am I going to manage my server remotely?
Yeah, right. So I get there's always someone who's going to say, but what about when I'm traveling and I need to get into a server? What about when I'm at home and I need to get into a server? What about, this is a shell server and people need to access it from anywhere? There's ways around all those things. It's all a question of how much pain you want to go through. So, I mean, the simplest thing is to simply say, you can't manage our servers unless you're on our corporate network. And that's pretty easy to solve if all of your workers, all of your sysadmins, or all of your shell users are local to your corporate network. If they're not local to your corporate network, obviously that's a problem. But what you can do to mitigate that is to simply set up a VPN so that even remote users can appear to be local users. Now, obviously, that moves the single point of attack to the VPN, but at least it's not all of your hundreds, possibly, of servers that have SSH enabled, right?
Right. So it's about security in depth.
Yeah.
So it's about creating layers. So if I pop your SSH box, I'm already on your server and I'm able to do things.
Right.
Now, if that's a jump server, that could be pretty bad. If that's just an outside server that's your website, I mean, it's equally. It depends on what sort of level of access that server has into the rest of your network. With the VPN, if I can pop your VPN, I've got access to get into your network now, but I don't necessarily have access into any of the servers themselves. And of course, your VPN, whatever you're using for authentication there, is different from what you would use for SSH, right?
Theoretically. All right, so speaking of authentication, the next thing I do to every single machine that I ever set up SSH on is I turn off root logins. Now, I get why this is on by default, because you may not have a root login, or you may not have a user set up when you first install a machine, but as soon as you get a user installed, and personally, I do that at build time automatically, turn off root access. So when I build a machine, permit root login in the OpenSSH config file gets turned off because I have a local user that has sudo access. So there's no reason to allow root login. You should not be SSHing into your machines as root, period.
You shouldn't be using the root account directly in almost every situation. That's what sudo is.
Yeah, there really aren't a lot of reasons to log in as root directly unless you're in a case where your users are gone or you've been locked out of your user account or whatever.
Right.
And in that case, get to the console. There is no reason to remotely log in as root at all. The next thing I always do, and this is more or less, like, you don't have to make any configuration changes to make this happen, but I set up an SSH key that requires a password. And when I log into a machine, I use the key to authenticate instead of the password. So if I'm sending credentials across the wire, I'd rather send crypto, like a key, than even an encrypted password. You agree?
Absolutely.
I think that's valid. Plus, it just makes things easier. You can unlock your SSH key and store it in your local SSH agent and not have to unlock it every time you SSH to a machine. And when you connect to a machine, you're not entering a password at all because the SSH agent is storing that. So there's less chance you're going to type out your password, and you get a little bit of convenience out of it. So why wouldn't you do this? Personally, and I went into this in the article, when I generate an SSH key, I usually define the number of bits I want it to be. Recently, I've been using 4096 just because that seems reasonable. The default, I think, is 3000 something at the moment. That seems to go up as time goes on. As things get easier to crack, the standard goes higher. I always try to aim a little higher than the standard.
Right, and there's different types of ciphers that you can use. I mean, we're talking about AES or DES keys.
Yeah, these are RSA.
Right, you're right, RSA keys. So you can also use
you can pick different ciphers,
cipher keys, and I mean, there's different types of keys that you can use. So if you are a crypto nerd and know all about this stuff, you have the option of changing to something different.
Yeah. So pick a different cipher if you want to. Basically, the server you're SSHing to doesn't have to really know what cipher you're using. I suppose that the SSH server could have certain ciphers enabled or disabled, and maybe we'll talk about that in a bit. I don't know if you have that on the top of your head there, Jason. I don't. But as long as the SSH server has that particular cipher enabled, I think that's how that works. You can use whatever cipher you want and whatever key length you want. Again, I think the SSH server can have limitations on key lengths as well, though I haven't looked into that. So basically when you...
I'm not sure about the key length, but the cipher-wise, both the client and the server can have lists of acceptable ciphers.
Right.
As long as you match, it basically goes from like strongest to weakest.
Yeah.
And as long as you have a match on the client and the server of a cipher, it'll use that one. And this is where HTTPS does this as well. So this is where it's a little bit more common in the web world, but this is where there's an attack that basically downgrades the encryption you're using. And the way it does that is that it won't accept anything but a weak cipher on the client side.
Right.
And then the server just says, oh, okay, we'll just use the weak one.
Yeah.
So one of the, what Nate mentioned about changing the ciphers, one of the things you want to do is, and there's well-known sites out there that can give you the list of what the currently accepted ciphers are. By default, OpenSSH has a couple of arguably weak ciphers in it that you can disable. And I haven't seen any effect. I mean, most clients support the strong stuff anyway, so
Yeah.
you're not going to break anything.
And again, by limiting access to port 22 or whatever port you're running SSH on, that mitigates this a little bit. If the bad guys can't even reach the port, they can't try to downgrade ciphers and try to get a lower cipher, that's attackable in some way. So, it's, again, this whole theory of defense in depth. If people can't reach the port, they can't attack it, period. If they can get to the port, you'll want to have only the best ciphers or the reasonably best ciphers enabled so people can't try to downgrade and do an attack that way.
Right.
So
and now, since you're using a key on your SSH that has a password on it, you're two-factor, right?
Totally. Not quite. We'll talk about that later. So the next thing, which is where I thought you were going when you did that little transition, was now that you're using a key, and the key has a password, and you can't authenticate without unlocking the key, disable password authentication on the SSH daemon. Now, this, again, will depend on your use case. If you have some sort of a broad shell server and you don't want to have to deal with making everyone generate a key, which is a thing I have done, by the way. I have talked people who have no idea what an SSH key is through generating an SSH key because that is the level of security that we want on SSH. You can turn off password authentication completely. Try to brute force passwords when passwords are turned off. It doesn't work. So I usually turn off password-based auth. It's just an option in your SSH config. Password authentication, no. And then the only way you can authenticate is with a key.
So just some quick clarification, because we're talking passwords on the keys and password authentication. So these are two different things. Password authentication in SSH is when you connect to an SSH server. It sends your username and then says, what's your password?
Right. And this is that system's password, your PAM password. Right.
So that password is stored on the server that you're trying to connect to. That's what's in Etsy Shadow, or would be an Etsy password, or whatever PAM is configured to use.
Yes.
The other password, the key password that we're talking about, is a password that is on the crypto key itself. It is not stored on the server. It is something that you have locally, and that, in theory, can't be cracked or stolen because the key exists on your client.
Right.
And there's a caveat with that I think Nate will cover as well.
Yeah. So we may as well chat about that right now. If you're going where I think you're going, you could and maybe should implement a SSH key rotation policy, where periodically you are regenerating your SSH key. Now, personally, I do that when I do things like get a new laptop. I'm not doing it like every 6 months or something. This is not changing the password for your key, but generating an entirely new key. Because if today your machine is infected with some kind of a Trojan, or you forget it on the bus and someone gets your SSH key off of it, the password on that key is valid for the file they've copied. If I change my key password tomorrow and you copied my key yesterday, then the password on that key follows the file, right? So my password 2 days ago on the key that was stolen 2 days ago will stay the same regardless of whether I've changed the password today or tomorrow. So you don't want to just change the password, although you can do that. You can change a password on an SSH key without changing the public key, which is how you'd be authenticating to these servers. But if you're going to regenerate, if you're going to rotate keys, you need to actually regenerate the whole key, not just change the password.
Right. So and regenerating keys can be painful because now you have to replace all of the keys on all the servers.
Right.
There is a use for changing the password on a key. I don't know how common it is, but if you have a system where a key is shared in some manner, and come in and out, and given certain circumstances, you may want to change the password on the key.
Yeah.
Now, the caveat there is that you want to ensure that that key is inaccessible so that the person that's leaving could not have possibly gotten a copy of that key.
Right.
If you can't guarantee that, you might as well be creating new keys.
I mean, personally,
and by the way, if you're sharing keys, you may want to rethink that strategy too.
yeah, if I had a shared key and someone left that I didn't trust, or even if someone left that I did trust, I would probably regenerate the key. I don't think I would just change the password.
Every situation is different.
Yeah.
There are situations where you just cannot avoid shared accounts.
Yeah.
As much as I hate to admit that, those situations exist. And in those situations, if you can use a key, that's great. But you definitely want to have a mechanism where the person logging in can't access the key directly. Because again, if they can copy it, even if you change the password, it's not going to matter.
Okay, so moving on to the next thing, and this isn't necessarily an SSH thing, but more of a shell thing, so it's kind of related. If you're running a shell server, or a server where people need to get shell, which is generally a shell server, one thing you can do to increase security, depending on the use case for the shell server, is you can put them into a cheat jail when they log in. And this would be whether they're logging in from the console or over SSH or whatever. I don't do this myself because we don't run a lot of shell servers, but if you're in like a mixed use environment where people need shell so they can run Python or they can do something like that, this might not be a bad thing. Jailing them inside of their home directory, it's not a new technique. It's certainly a thing that I've known about for a long time. It was a suggestion that someone gave to me when I asked, what the best practices people are using to secure SSH before I wrote this article. So I figured I'd include it.
Yeah, that's one. I see that a lot with other software. So you may jail your Apache server or your Nginx server or something else. SSH jails they're out there, but I don't see them as quite as common as other things.
Yeah, because shell servers are getting less common. Period. Generally, if you need something that serves that purpose, there's other ways to do it without SSH or without an actual shell. So that's getting less and less common. But yeah, if you need a shell server and that person does not need access to the rest of the system, they need access to certain specific things on the shell server, a cheat jail might be a good way to do that. All right, so did you have anything that was directly server related that you wanted to cover? I saw you put some stuff in the notes. Anything beyond what we already talked about?
Two other things. Two other things that you can do to lock down SSH. There are instances where you need SSH open to the world because I don't know, you setting up a VPN server is a step too far. There's reasons for it. One of the things you can do is run SSH on a different port. That is, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't.
This reminds me of my.
If I scan your server, I can figure it out pretty quick.
This reminds me of the days when I would administer SQL servers, and there was a checkbox in the configuration that says hide the SQL server, and all it did was change it from 1433 to 2433.
Right.
Because nobody would guess that.
Right. Yeah, that port sent shivers down my spine.
Yeah,
I remember that
1433.
One. That's SQL Slimer.
Yeah. Oh, right.
Anyway,
go ahead.
Yeah. So, that's. I mean, you can do that. It's not standard, and it doesn't do a whole lot to protect you. Another thing you can do is use something called knock ports, and knock ports are interesting. So basically, what you're doing is so there's another daemon that runs called knockd. I'm sure there's other ones, but knockd is the one I happen to know about.
Yeah.
And you give it a pattern of port numbers.
Right.
And what happens is when you want to connect to SSH, you have your client. Well, you can do this manually too with like Telnet or Netcat or something. You're going to connect to all those different ports that you've given in the order that you've given them.
Yeah.
And then, and only then, will the server basically set up a firewall rule or a host allow rule that opens the SSH port to your IP. So basically you're knocking. So like you may come in and say, I'm going to hit port 25, 27, 23, and 2.
Yeah.
And then it says, okay, cool, it's you. open port 22, and then you
Yeah,
can get
so think about this as like, you've seen the old-timey movies where you're trying to get into the secret passage, and there's someone at the door, and you have to make a special knock on the door, which is essentially like a password. You go like, and then they'll let you in. Well, same concept, right? It's knock ports, that's how you'd call it. So you perform a knock, which is I've connected to port 8, port 5, port 82, port 3. Now you've opened port 22, I can connect to port 22.
Right. And you have to connect to them in sequence within a certain time period.
Right.
And then it opens up the port and you can get in, and it acts just like SSH.
So that's pretty neat stuff. I mean, I would say that if you're going to the level of implementing knock ports and that your users are okay with that, they'll probably be okay with a VPN.
Yeah, I mean, this is you have a server on the internet. It is yours. You're the only one that uses it, etc.
Yeah, right.
And there are SSH clients that have knock capabilities built in.
Yeah,
I thought was.
Yeah.
So you can go in and say, here's the order for the knock ports, and it will automatically do the knock and then make the SSH connection.
Does the normal Open SSH client have it? Do you know? I'm just curious.
I believe so. I'd have to look.
I've
seen it. I've never used it, but I've seen it.
I could see setting up like a shell script that replaces, instead of typing SSH server, user at server name, you'd type like knock user at server name, and it would do the knock and then connect. That wouldn't be that hard with Netcat or something.
Yeah, I think I'm looking now. I think knock. The actual knockd may have a way to do this, but you run it before you run whatever you're trying to connect with.
Yeah.
And knockd, I guess, you can also do a knock to open, knock to close type thing.
Cool.
It sort of depends on how
you can lock the door when you leave.
Yep.
That's neat.
Yep.
All right. So you said two things, and that was one. What was the other?
Yep. So the other one is two-factor.
Right.
We didn't. I hinted at it, but we didn't cover it. SSH keys are not two-factor. They're not. Period. End of story. There's no argument here. It's not two-factor.
Some people will claim that they are, but I agree, they're not.
Right. So you can have, and this is a little bit more involved. You have to set something up usually in PAM to do this. But you can set it up to use something like a YubiKey, Google Authenticator. I mean, there's a bunch of different two-factor bits that you can do. There you go, YubiKey. And basically, you'll log into SSH. Your key will be used. Your SSH key will be used as the password, because again, not two-factor, because the password that you have on your SSH key to unlock it is not a factor, because it is not a factor being used to log into the server.
Right.
And then once you get past the initial, like, hey, your key works, it'll pop up and say, what's your two-factor code? Whether it's an RSA token or a TOTP client, or, you plug in your YubiKey and touch it, whatever.
Right.
And that adds that second factor. And interestingly enough, two-factor is assuming you're using something that's not like SMS-based, that's easy to intercept, two-factor is arguably strong enough to be just your password. It makes it a lot better. So if you have a weak password, adding a second factor turns it into an account that is nigh impossible to break into.
Yeah. Now, I mean, obviously, I wouldn't recommend this, but you could essentially give your password to an attacker and don't give them your second factor. They still can't get in, unless they find some way to compromise the second factor. Which is possible. I've seen people,
that's
circumventing Google's two-factor and things like that. But yeah, that's a lot harder. It's certainly not as easy as phishing someone's password. Before two-factor, all I had to do was say, I'm with your insurance company, and I need your password, or your bank or whatever, and I need your password to do such and such, because I'm totally the support people, and we need to reset your password. And then you give them your password, and then they've owned you, because they can just log right into your bank and do your thing. do the thing. And then, God forbid, if you've reused that password elsewhere and they know other places you've got accounts, because they just walk right into those too. Second factor mitigates that, in most cases. I never deal with absolutes in this case, but in most cases, two-factor will mitigate the fact that you've been sloppy with your password.
Yeah. By the way, don't give your password out.
Don't give your password to people. Absolutely not.
I don't care who it is. President of your company, God himself can come down to earth.
Nobody.
Your password.
Well, God would already know your password.
Right. Which means if he's asking for your password,
because
not God.
What does God need with a starship? No?
Yes.
Okay. So, anyway, you don't question the Almighty. All right. That leads us actually pretty well into the last thing that I had in my article anyway, which is rotation in general. I covered SSH key rotation. We've already talked about that, though. We talked about MFA, but password policy and password rotation. I know this is a sore spot for many people, you included, Jason.
Yes.
So in the article, I made it a point to cover the fact that password policy and rotation, there are many people, including NIST, who believe that password policy, like complex password policy, like 8 characters of randomly generated crap, or give me letters, numbers, and symbols, and 8 characters is fine. That combined with arbitrary password rotation leads people to bad password habits. You can argue with me all you want. It is true. I think it's true. I've seen it. I've done it myself. Okay? You know?
Yeah, absolutely.
Like, I just need to log into my workstation, and the frickin' sysadmin is forcing me to change my password. Okay, I'll just add 2 numbers to the end. Okay, I'm done. Oh, that wasn't good enough? I'll change it to winter 2018. Right?
Yeah, I had to deal with an AS400 where the password rotation policy was it was something less than 30 days, and it remembered the last like 6 or 8 passwords.
That's ridiculous.
So guess what I had? I had password 1 through password 9.
You had 9 passwords you rotated through.
Yeah, and I would just rotate them.
And that's terrible. It's terrible password hygiene, and you should know better, right? So if someone who should know better can't be bothered with it because it's ridiculous, then, I mean, how do you expect the average user to deal with that? Now, I will say this, and this is a caveat I covered in the article. If you have a reasonable password policy, reasonable rotation policy, like history, and a reasonable time limit for such things, I do think that highly privileged administrators like myself or like you might do okay with the password policy that forces rotation, simply because they understand why they're doing it, they understand how they should be setting the password. I still think that a timed rotation is a little silly unless you know or think there was a compromise.
So, agreed. If you're in a very high privileged position where you can do a lot of damage, password rotation is okay within reason. I'm talking, 6 months rotation.
Yeah, not 30 days.
But the password policy needs to be it should be like a 6-month rotation. But you have to have something that says your password must be like 15 characters, 20 characters, right? Get rid of the, you have to have symbols and numbers and a lot of other crap. Just make it long.
Go to a passphrase, and that's what NIST's recent change. I think 2018 is when they changed those policies or changed those suggestions.
For folks like us, like I use a password manager. Every system I'm in, my goal is to find out what length password it will accept, and I choose the longest password, and my passwords are garbage.
Yes.
You can't remember these things. That's why I have a password manager.
Yeah, exactly. I randomly generate minimum 32 character passwords through LastPass. They're stored in LastPass, and I don't even know what they are. Like, I've actually had trouble getting into services of my own because I couldn't get to LastPass for some reason. I didn't have my phone with me, or my second factor wasn't in my pocket, that sort of thing, right? It's like, well, I guess I'm just going to have to do it later. So, I would agree. And in cases where it's a password you need to remember, like, say, the login for your laptop, Like, that's a thing that it's not easy to integrate your password manager with. I always set that to a phrase. A sentence, including spaces. Sometimes I do character substitutions. I include punctuation, and that's good enough. Because that's going to be really hard to crack and really hard to guess. You seem distracted by something.
Weirdness on my computer that I caused.
After tonight, I wouldn't expect it. Guys, we went through quite a bit just to get video and whatnot working for this call.
Yep. Yeah, I went to do something and hit the wrong button. Anyway, so yeah, I mean, password in general, strength-wise, what I have found in the various systems is even for non-administrators, if you have a password policy that requires a longer password. So my policies, when I have to implement them, I try to push for at least 15 characters. I try not, I mean, some systems don't allow you to do this, but I try not to put restrictions on what characters you can use.
Mm-hmm.
So I want 15 characters. If you want to put 15 characters of the letter A, I mean, that's dumb, but I guess you can do that. But I want to be able to say you have 15 characters of a password, make it something that's memorable. Because now when you're dealing with 15 characters, people are going to be like, oh my God, I can't remember. Like they're going to think of almost naturally start thinking of phrases. You have a phrase.
Well, I mean,
that's great.
You touch on an interesting point. What they've been trained to think is that they need a 15-character random password, and they're going to have to remember it.
Right.
And then either you tell them or they realize, no, wait, with that long of a password, I can type the first sentence of my favorite book. And then you've got a password or passphrase, which is hard to guess and hard to crack.
Right. And as a developer, you should be putting hints on there that say 15 characters is the minimum. Use whatever words, phrases, whatever.
Right.
We recommend using a phrase. Like the XKCD, horse, battery, staple.
Correct, horse, battery, staple.
Yep, that's it.
This is a perfect example because that's like, I don't know, 8 years ago, and we all remember it.
Right. Now, don't use that password. Everybody remembers it. It's in all the dictionaries at this point.
Yes.
That's the idea. Think of 4 random words, string them together, put spaces or dashes or exclamation points or whatever you want to use as a delimiter, and you've got a long, strong password that arguably is not going to be cracked very easily.
Indeed. So yeah, that's our thoughts on password policies. I would not. I don't think I would ever suggest a password rotation policy unless I suspected compromise. That's the only real caveat there. Now, I will say that I've been in a situation where it felt like a lot of our passwords had been breached, but we didn't have any proof of that. You were there as well. The two of us were at the college. We were having accounts, email accounts breached like 2-3 times a day, and it was quite frustrating. And I started wondering, has some password database been leaked that we don't know about? And because of that, these passwords are just like, oh, this one got locked out, I'll move to the next one, because that's really what it felt like. I guess you could argue that in that case, I thought there was a breach, right? So that's a valid reason to force password expiry. But even then, I couldn't get management to buy in. But whatever, that's neither here nor there. So anyway, password rotation would fix that scenario where you don't know that your passwords have been leaked in some way and people are now using them. But that may not be enough to say, yes, you should definitely be doing password rotation. Right? So, you seem feverishly trying to fix something on your machine again.
No, that's something else. So password rotation is one of those things that I would use with kid gloves. If you don't think you're going to need it, don't implement it because it goes wrong quickly.
Yeah.
And honestly, you're just going to annoy people.
It really is. It's just annoying. And I get sometimes people are okay with being annoyed for the sake of security, but most people aren't. They're just going to complain, oh, those IT people. You know, how many times have you heard that? Right?
Too many.
Too many.
Too many.
All right, so that covers everything that I put in my article. It covers everything I could think of to lock down SSH. There are probably a lot more crazy situations where you could get yourself, crazily secured on OpenSSH. The one point I do want to make is that out of the box, if you just install, in my case, my experience is with Red Hat and CentOS systems. If you just install an OS, let OpenSSH come out of the box with whatever the defaults are, and use a decently secure password, you're actually pretty safe. Even if you left SSH open to the world, right? So don't think that we're suggesting that OpenSSH is a thing that is horribly insecure out of the box. It's pretty good. These suggestions are just to make it even better. So take it for what it is.
Right.
All right, and with that, I think we are done for the night. You have any final thoughts on OpenSSH or SSH in general?
There's a lot more functionality in there.
Oh, a ton.
You may not necessarily want to have turned on, such as port forwarding or key forwarding. So just some of that stuff is on by default. Be careful.
Yeah, and that stuff is really useful. It's useful for administrators, so be careful turning it off because you may have someone that wants to be able to use it. However, it's really, really useful for attackers.
Yes.
So keep that in mind if you turn that stuff on. Most of our systems have it on because we use it for certain things, but there's probably a large number of our systems that we wouldn't need things like key forwarding and port forwarding that we could probably turn it off and not care, not even notice.
Yeah, apparently key forwarding is very dangerous.
Yeah.
It puts your unlocked SSH keys in memory, and an attacker can theoretically get them. I don't remember where I read it. There was an article or a warning or something about that. So that one can be particularly dangerous. You have to have a foothold on the machine to be able to.
Yeah, I mean it must
that, but
it must be forwarding that key into memory on the machine you're connecting to. Otherwise, you wouldn't be able to connect to the next machine, right? So it's got to be in the SSH agent on that machine, right? So yeah, I know it's tempting to alias your SSH command so that it forwards your key, but that's probably a bad idea, right?
Yeah, in general. There's uses for it. I tend not to do that, only because like if I was doing that, the reason would be because I'm going from my machine to a jump server.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to forward on to additional machines.
Mm-hmm.
And I use VPNs for this these days, because the idea of there's two ways to do it. One is you can forward your keys. The other one is you have to put the key locally on the machine. Now, arguably, putting the key locally on the machine, even if it's temporary, can be more secure
because it requires the password.
Where to get it, and could use the password needs to be. So the key forwarding thing is dangerous because when you have key forwarding turn on, it's not forwarding the keys that you need to get to the next server. It's forwarding
all the keys.
Every key you have that's in memory.
Yeah.
So that's where the sort of dangerous part comes in. So that in that aspect, I like VPN servers better because then I can go through that.
Right.
The other, when I was one of the security people that I worked with, the companies that I worked with wanted us to set up a jump server. They called it a bastion server.
Yes, I've heard that term. It's a jump server, jump host, bastion host. Right. Yeah, same thing.
Right. And my question was, okay, so that's how we get to it from the outside world. Yes. Okay, so how do we get to the inside machines? We'll use different keys. Okay, where are those keys stored? Oh, you put them on the bastion server. I said, okay, we're done talking now because I'm not listening to anything else you have to say. So
nice.
Key forwarding is useful if you can keep it secure. Just be careful. And port forwarding is also equally dangerous because you can forward both local and remote ports. And if you don't keep an eye on what you're doing, you could accidentally bypass firewalls.
Yeah, or bad guys could intentionally bypass firewalls.
Right.
Right. All right, so I think that covers it. Any final thoughts?
SSH is awesome.
SSH is awesome. SSH is awesome and versatile and needs to be treated like any sufficiently awesome and versatile tool. Right? You don't let your kids play with you don't let your kids play with hatchets, even though hatchets are awesome, right?
My kid plays with SSH all the time, so
Yeah. Your kid's different.
Oh, okay.
All right, so I think that's it for tonight. Thanks to any of you who have decided to watch us with our first attempt into using streaming with OBS on YouTube tonight. I don't know that we got anybody in the chat, so I don't know that anybody was watching, but that's okay. Next time, we're going to record on a Wednesday like normal, and hopefully we'll have some more folks chatting, and we'll have gained a little more experience with OBS, and that'll be cool. If you want to watch us live, you can do so via YouTube, youtube.com/IronSysAdminPodcast. You can also join our Slack workspace if you want to chat with us or give us feedback or just interact with the community that we're building there. IronSysAdmin.com/Slack will get you to an invite link. You can check us out on the socials, Facebook and Twitter. Just look up Iron Sysadmin. You can support us via Patreon if you want to help us out monetarily. Patreon.com/IronSysAdmin. And I think that's it for tonight. Did I miss anything? I don't think I missed anything.
Leave comments.
Leave
reviews.
Yes. The more feedback we get from folks, the more we know what you guys want. If you want to look up me on Twitter, I'm at Gangriff. Jason, you want to share your handle?
Yep, I'm at XENOPHAGE. And you can see I've been writing blog posts intermittently at blog.godshell.com.
Yep.
And you should probably tell them where your SSH blog post is.
So, that'll be included in the show notes. Jason has done a great job of not telling anybody how to spell his Twitter handle, but I'm going to give you guys a hint. This entire broadcast on YouTube has it spelled right at the bottom of his picture. So, see that? Fail. Anyway, thanks for watching, folks. If you want to check out my blog, it's underground.org, UNDR-ground.org. I've been on a bit of a blogging spree lately. I've got a couple articles that are in the pipeline for Enable Sysadmin. Once they're published there, I'll probably be posting them on my blog as well. A couple cool things for Sysadmin Appreciation Day. I did a nice piece on how to appreciate your systems and network people because they need appreciation as well. And another thing where I recanted my the day the Rev Manager went away, which you guys might remember that from a previous episode from about a year ago.
Don't be like Nate.
Don't be like Nate. I included that in the thing. I titled it, The Day the Rev Manager Went Away, How to Lose 10 Pounds Through Stress, Anxiety, and Lack of Sleep. So anyway, I think we're going to call it a night. Thank you guys for watching. Thanks for listening. And we will catch you in roughly 2 weeks.
Not all.
Outro music is loud. Did that hit you really hard? It hit me really hard. All right, folks, we're going to call it a night. So thank you for watching live on YouTube if you're there. If you are there, you weren't in chat, so I'm going to assume nobody was there. So good night, everybody. We'll catch you next time.